So, guys, I want to talk about AEW Collision, and I do want to say that, I've not been watching Collision. Like, they really have to do stuff to make us really care about the show. And honestly, with Tommaso Ciampa and Mark Briscoe having a match tonight, it was obviously something that made me want to watch. And actually, I overslept, so I actually had to watch Collision, starting at 11 p.m. tonight. But when you make people really care about these shows, when you give something to hook us, we would be really invested. And there's two things about Collision. Number one, it's very disorganized. It's just like a continuation of Dynamite when it should be okay. Certain wrestlers, certain championships, and it all should be a way to help build up to pay-per-views. If they do that with Collision, it's going to be a very, very strong show. And then I also understand that have my handy dandy notebook. I also understand that with what happened last week where they had to cancel Collision in Texas, they were really trying to just make it up to the audience because of the bad weather. That's why they canceled. So I want to say this, that they had a very large crowd tonight. They also had three championship matches. It was a very well built show. And they also gave us stuff to really care about the show. I would say that a concern about this show is that I felt they could have built more Australia matches. I also felt another concern about the show is also as to sometimes when you have way too many championship matches, it's like, what are you doing for Australia? You should treat that more like a pay-per-view because there's a lot of people online talk about how even this year there are some controversies of the Australia show being a lot of money for not a lot of quality, really. So really, like I said, both the Australia shows should have been like a day one, day two type of pay-per-view leading to Revolution, really. And it's unfortunate that they're not doing that. No, and it's kind of unfortunate that you have some championship matches here that could have been pushed to Australia. So they open with Darby Allin versus Clark Connors. Things I didn't like about this is that who the hell is Clark Connors? People don't know who he is. You could have shown a video package with him and Gabe Kidd and New Japan Pro Wrestling. Say, okay, now he's Gabe Kidd's friends. Here's a visual of that. Instead of just the announcers just like flapping their gums about it. Show don't tell. When Darby Allin goes down to the ring, Connors ambushes him. It really sets up the heel dynamic. They mentioned that he's friends with Gabe Kidd. Okay, that's good continuity. Connors throws him against the barricade. I appreciate Connors. One thing I like about what Connors does is that when he attacks Darby Allin outside the ring, he keeps going in the ring to break up the 10 count. This is not like, them going to the audience for a couple of minutes during a match or whatever. This is actually, hey, in professional wrestling, there are 10 counts. You have to go inside the ring to break it up, really. So he understands how to be a professional wrestler when many people don't. MJF and Ospreay, like them having that match in Little Rock where they went into the stands for a few minutes. That's an example of bullshit. This year, this guy says, okay, there's rules to this match we got to follow. Darby Allin jumps over the ring steps. He does a drop kick. He does the over the rope dive. He also does a scorpion deathlock submission. And then Darby Allin gets on the microphone. He mentions that his goal is that he wants to be the AEW champion. Then he gets ambushed by Gabe Kidd and Clark Connors. And Gabe Kidd, to paraphrase Gabe Kidd, he says that I'm not done with you. Wherever you go, I'm going to be there. Like, my goal is ultimately end Darby Allin. So I like this in a way because obviously they could extend this to Revolution. Then after Revolution, they can really just say, okay, we're done with Gabe Kidd and Darby Allin because honestly, we don't want to kind of make this a little too repetitive. So I think that, you can do Gabe Kidd, Clark Connors, Darby Allin, and another person to, have a tag team match. So Darby has to find a tag team partner. It could be, it really could be somebody on the roster. I'm not sure who because they have a lot of people on that roster and they need to make more singles babyface stars, So definitely somebody who wants to be a singles babyface stars, that would be kind of cool to help Darby Allin this one time. The other things, they did a promo with Jet Set Rodeo. And I was a little concerned about this because I was like saying, shouldn't they have Hangman Adam Page in this? Why are you just seeing Hong Kong Phooey and Swerve Strickland Jr. in this, So I appreciate them just trying to make the trios title actually mean something by just saying, hey, we got to yeah, we got to start having matches and other things like that. So I appreciate that, but it's almost like, what are you doing with this? So the next match is Crew versus the Rascals, and I was saying too, like I just one thing I didn't really like about this match is that with the Rascals, yes, I appreciate they got some hype really, but they should show graphics of who they are, or they should have ring gear with their names on it, because I've mentioned this before that sometimes with new people, most people don't know who they are, who their names are, and they're all just like really smaller guys. So it's almost like I didn't know who was who really, and even what their names were. So Zachary Weiss does tornado crossbodies. Desmond Xavier wins with a standing shooting star press. It was a really great match. It was a good way to introduce them. The Rascals got some momentum. People like the weed thing that they're into, so obviously, ride their momentum. Keep the momentum running. They mentioned that FTR is actually watching these matches because they're looking at these teams and saying, "Hey, you know what? Who's going to face us for the tag team titles?" And this is actually a problem because isn't Crew and the Rascals both trios champ? Both aren't they trios? So wouldn't it make sense to say that Jet Speed Rodeo is actually watching them? And that's actually good in a way because there's a lot of people in the tag team division. So it makes sense for tag team wrestlers to go after tag team titles, trios to go after trios titles. So I think that was kind of counterproductive. You cannot do something like, say, at this point in AEW, you cannot do something like, say, trios people should be in tag teams. Like, for example, if you want to do Ricochet in the Gates of Agony, it should not be the Gates of Agony. It should be Ricochet in the Gates of Agony in the trios division. So that way you have some separation, really, because that's also an issue with AEW. Trios wrestlers going to tag team titles, tag team wrestlers getting a friend going to trios titles, Darby Allin going up and down the card and everything like that. So they have to kind of just really just say, okay, we have certain teams that are trios teams right now, and they wrestle as a trios, or sometimes it's two of these guys or three of these guys or one of these guys, but we can't keep doing something like interchanging people in different divisions because that's going to confuse the audience. Because honestly, they can set up a really great trios championship match at Australia and a tag team championship match. Not just take a trios team and say, hey, you know what, let's put you in after the tag team titles when there's a lot of trios teams that are sitting at home, really. Really, you really have to you really just have to save certain people for certain divisions. So I didn't like that. Orange Cassidy and Tony Storm, they have a match. I wasn't into it. It was a squash match, but they announced it's going to be hair versus hair mixed gender tag team in Australia. So what that means is that it's Orange Cassidy and Tony Storm versus Marina Shafir and Wheeler Yuta. But the thing about it is that whoever gets pinned, if it's Wheeler Yuta or Marina Shafir or Orange Cassidy or Tony Storm, the loser gets shaved ass bald. So I like that stipulation, and I was actually kind of like a little worried. I was saying, are you going to do something like not announce that? Are they going to announce that a little bit later? But they announced it at the right time. And this has also kind of been a problem with AEW. Like in the main event, Megan Bain's team and the Triangle Madness attack the baby faces. So imagine if they announced a match at the end of Collision. Like that would have kind of worked really. Instead of just, we'll announce a match with Australia with these 10 women instead of just, we're going to just not do that really, Next thing is that they announced that next week it's going to be Kingston versus Ortiz. Kingston and Ortiz versus the Grizzled Young Vets in a parking lot fight. And then they get ambushed by Big Bill, Brian Keith, and the Grizzled Young Vets. So later on in the night, they changed it to the Rascals and Kingston Ortiz versus Big Bill, Brian Keith, and the Grizzled Young Vets in an eight-man fight in Las Vegas, really. Parking lot fight in Las Vegas, really. So I didn't like how they did this, where they said, okay, we're going to have a match, and we're going to change it, because that gets a little confusing a little bit. But it's just going to be like a Carnage parking lot type of thing, really. So it's going to be a lot of fun to watch. I'm actually looking forward to Collision next week to actually watch that if my old man ass doesn't fall asleep, really. Another thing that I'm going to say about the show that I really like, I look at my time, I ordered some, wings and mozzarella sticks, so I got to know when it's coming, guys. That's why I got to look at my alarm clock. But I also appreciate the show ending at 10 p.m. I appreciate that because a lot of times this motherfucker of a show ends at 10:15, 10:30. Stop doing that. Mark Briscoe versus Tommaso Ciampa for the TNT Championship. It was really bad. This was not the main event. A lot of people wanted to see this match. You make this the main event. You could have made the women's match the 9 o'clock one. The main event match. What's captivating to people should be the main event, really. So this being in the middle of the show was not good. I understand that they may have this gender thing of, okay, the women need the main event because we don't want it to feel that it's sexist. No, that's not being sexist. That's good booking. If whoever deserves the main event should be in the main event. Mark versus Tommaso Ciampa. I would say that I really appreciate that they did a promo package. You heard Tommaso Ciampa's kick-ass music. Like, this is what you need to do, really. Sometimes you might have to do this multiple times during a show where you have to have promo, good music, highlights, story, build all this shit, really, to make sure, the matches mean stuff. This is kind of what they're lacking in AEW. I think they need more video packages like WWE does so people kind of get contextualized with certain people. I also felt that through the match, they were very evenly matched. I actually think to myself, if you want to do FTR versus Mark Briscoe and Tommaso Ciampa, I think they would make a great tag team. Tommaso Ciampa and Mark Briscoe, I think that would be good. I'm happy that Tommaso Ciampa did not join the Don Callis family. That would have been a very, very horrible choice because they have way too many members and they need more single stars. So I think that would be the way to do it. And there's so many good matchups with like Takeshita versus Ciampa, Kyle Fletcher versus Ciampa, Okada versus Ciampa, Josh Alexander versus Ciampa. There's a lot of things that they can do, you know. So through the most of the match, only towards the end, I felt like some moves stood out to me, but they're very evenly matched. It really showed that they both were like these really old guys in their 40s that really can kick ass and take names. Also, too, during the match, Tommaso Ciampa does a psycho driller on the ring apron. Ciampa also does a draping DDT, and then he does a psycho driller on the second rope. I also would say that there are two things I didn't like. I do not like these championship matches when you do something like, say, okay, this is a 30-minute match. Then they don't announce it. So randomly you hear on the intercom, you randomly hear the announcer say, okay, there's 15 minutes, there's 5 minutes, there's whatever. Don't do that. If you want it to be a 30-minute match, then make it a 30-minute match. And then say, okay, then show the countdown because that's going to make it more epic. And you don't always need to go down to 3, 2, 1 pinfall after 30 minutes. It can be like any time during that match. It could be, you can get the pinfall way before the last 3 seconds. But don't do that because most people don't understand why in some matches they go over 30 minutes and some matches they stay at 30 minutes. They randomly put in the 30-minute stipulation, so I don't like that. You have to be consistent, and because that confuses the fuck out of people. The next thing that I would say is that I did not like the table spot because Tommaso Ciampa got up, and it looked like he was waiting for like a couple of seconds too long, really. So the choreography didn't look good, but this is also another problem with AEW. While it looks epic, you didn't need to go there. This is ultimately a regular match. This is not a hardcore match. When you have shit like this automatically is a no contest. So once again, why are we suspending the rules, really? When you add shit like this, it's a little too extra. I went to a restaurant on the Shady Glen the other day, and after I had my ice cream, I paid the bill. It would be just like if they said, oh, we'll try the swordfish or try these things, that things. It's, sometimes a little excess is not helpful. So I didn't feel that was good. Ciampa hits him with a running knee to get the win. There are a lot of positives to this match. I would love to see them have a match series. I would also say that it was a huge risk for AEW because AEW does not usually do championship switches this quick, really. Like, I think Mark Briscoe had the title. I'm not sure when he won the title. I believe it was at Full Gear. But usually they have longer title runs than this. Also, when somebody debuts, they usually don't put a title on them in AEW. You should do that sometimes in professional wrestling to break up monotony. And then the other thing I liked about this is that a lot of people were predicting that Ciampa was going to turn heel and join the Don Callis family, and I'm very happy he didn't do that for two reasons. There's way too many heels in AEW. There's way too many factions in AEW. It's just very counterproductive. You need to have people who are baby faces that are not part of tag teams, that are single stars, and they're either the mid card or the upper mid card. It can't just be just heels or factions or whatever, because that's a little overdone in AEW because they're seriously lacking. Because most people can't even name. I don't think you can even name like even 10 people in AEW who are single stars who are not part of a tag team faction or a heel group. So Ciampa definitely fills that in. I was thinking to myself, if they want to do a rematch with a hardcore stipulation, they could do that at Revolution or in Australia. But they're sending out Kyle Fletcher versus Ciampa in Australia. It makes sense because obviously Kyle Fletcher, I believe he's from New Zealand or Australia, from Oceania. This is a way for them to kind of say, okay, let's actually just, move the needle a little bit forward. You can even do Mark Briscoe and Darby Allin as a tag team against Clark Connors and Gabe Kidd. I think that's what they're going to do. Or even if it's a hardcore match, you could like do that for a while. And then you could get to, Ciampa versus the Don Callis family, trying to get that TNT title back, by any means necessary. So that way, so that way you're doing something different, because that way you're doing something different. Also, too, Josh Alexander, Lance Archer, and Rocky Romero did a promo where they're beating up a bunch of people backstage. It was kind of bad because there was a lot of shouting and screaming backstage, so I couldn't really hear what Josh Alexander was saying. But I was a little confused. I was like, who the hell are they beating up, really? They had Okada versus Adam Priest. I wasn't invested in this match. Who the fuck is Adam Priest? And they need to stop doing that. If somebody's doing well on Ring of Honor, why the hell are they having a match on AEW television? They need to say, okay, this is Adam Priest. Here are all the matches that he's been winning. Let's show a video package. Let's talk to him. What does win the international championship mean? What does it mean to face Okada? Do a little bit more like, what's the word, explaining, showing, not telling, recapping, building people a little bit more, because this is what kills AEW. Because otherwise this feels like I'm playing Marvel versus Capcom, where it's like these two random people that I don't know who the fuck about, or I know who one of them are really. Okada, we know who he is. Adam Pearce, who the fuck is he? I have no idea who the hell he is really. I have no idea who the hell he is. So they should have established him a lot more. On AEW television, or done a promo package to recap, okay, this guy's been on Ring of Honor for a lot of months, and this is what he can do. I would rather, they could have even done one of the Von Erichs, in this spot, just to kind of, I think in a way it would pop the Texas crowd. And then also they didn't do anything with Okada after this. You don't see the catch come down. You don't kind of build towards a match at, you don't build towards a match at Australia when he should be having a match at Australia, just because obviously international title when you want to defend it in Australia. Then after that they announced the 8-person tag team match. I mentioned that before, next week, Street Fight. And then I like what happened. They interviewed Tommaso Ciampa, and they said something like, he's kissing the bell. He's saying something like, the TNT title's like his second kid, really. And it was kind of really heartfelt, and that was also kind of good because honestly, this builds his character. He's a heartfelt guy. He works hard. He's like an older person at the end of his career. He's just like that old man who just wants to have a couple more fights because he has some fights left. And he cares about his family, loves his family. So when you see Kyle Fletcher just give him some shit, or Don Callis' family gives him some shit, it's actually going to mean something. So that's great. That's great character building. And that's what AEW lacks. They lack character building. And this is good character building. And then the main event was Harley Cameron Willow versus Julia Hart and Sky Blue for the women's tag team titles. I wasn't invested in this match. Nothing really stood out to me. This has kind of been a little repetitive. They kind of faced each other a little too much. The post-match was a little interesting. It was It was the Babes of Wrath and Chris Statlander getting beaten down by Megan Payne, Penelope Ford, and the Triangle of Madness. So, what are you guys going to do with this? Is there going to be like a Blood and Guts in Australia? They could do that. They can do a Anarchy in the Arena in Australia. They can do Tekla versus Chris Statlander for the AEW Championship Hardcore. They could do Will Nightingale versus Tekla or one of them. They could do Megan Bain and Penelope Ford and Megan Bain and one of the Triangle of Madness members because Penelope Ford's not that big of a person. They can kind of do something where it's like two of them versus like the Babes of Wrath for the titles role. There's something that you can really set up to. So I think that they could have done that. That would have probably been a better ending to say, hey, you know what? It's 5-on-5 women. Let's build a match really. Let's work. Like maybe do a women's Anarchy in the Arena or something like that. Like give Australia something really special. Instead of just okay, it's just a random smudge and we don't know where this is gonna go really. It's a cliffhanger, but I think they should have built a match to Australia. Overall, I would say that the show was very strong. It gave me something that was very interesting. Obviously, this was a very competitive weekend with the Royal Rumble and GCW having a show in Philadelphia this weekend. The other thing that I would say is that obviously you have to make Collision matter, and they did it this week. They also had to make it up for the Arlington crowd. So, mission accomplished really. I also feel that again, they were also using the show to build to match to Australia because that's what they need to do. This is what Collision should be for. It should be have their own titles, have their own wrestlers, have their own stories, and also play catch up, build to pay-per-view matches. Because sometimes with Dynamite, they don't have enough time really. And then that way the show has its own purpose, really. And Collision, I think they've not been doing good with viewership. I think they got like 300,000, and that was a big talking point at one point. But they really could build Collision to a bigger and better show, really. It's ultimately if they just do give a fuck consistently or not, really. And then also, I really think that they need to go back to Arlington or Dallas. They have a lot of people there, so they need to do pay-per-views there. So obviously, definitely I would hope they would announce more pay-per-views. I think that maybe Forbidden Door or World's End or World's End or even Full Gear, like that should be in Texas this year. I know some people are saying Forbidden Door in Mexico, no problem. I'm not sure what they're gonna do Double or Nothing. They could do it in Mohegan Sun. They could do it in Atlantic City. They can do it at the Prudential Center. They can do it in Las Vegas. They can do it in Phoenix. But I think AEW can switch up their pay-per-views. I think like Texas should get a pay-per-view every single year. My friend WrestleTide would definitely like that. But yeah, I think that Texas, they have a really good market really. So I'd really hope that they do something. Or even like if they're not doing good in Australia, they should even have like Grand Slam. They should have Grand Slam Texas, next year or something like that. Or a Grand Slam in Canada or something like that. But really that I think Texas is a really great market. They always do very well there. So I really just hope that they kind of just, keep doing pay-per-views in Texas and other shows down there. So it was definitely a lot of positives. It was a step in the right direction. They could have done a little bit more with some issues, such as having the main event be the biggest drawing match, which is Ciampa versus Briscoe. And they could have set up more match to Australia, because just remember, I think they're doing the show. They're doing the Saturday show, which I believe is in Brisbane. They're making that a really big show. I don't know what they're doing for Sydney, but they can't just do like a house show where not a lot of people see it or whatever, really. Because if they do that, then that's kind of like a fuck you. Like both these shows have to really matter. It is like getting two tests. You have to get like a passing grade on both of them for it to be passable. You can't get an A+ on one and a 0 on another, or F on another. So hopefully they build to both the shows very well. They need to, or else they need to get the fuck out of Australia and stay the fuck out of Australia.